So let's kick this thing off. Wanted to take a second here and let you guys know a couple things. First of all, thank you for taking the time out of your day and joining us to check out another webinar. We're going to be talking all things Archery Elk, specifically using the Hunt app. And then I'm sure we'll dive into a few things too as well, just more generalized archery elk hunting once we get to the Q&A. But a reminder, use that Q&A function at the bottom for all questions, and then the chat for talking back and forth. We do have a customer service representative. Sarah is on, and she will be doing her best to answer her questions as far as app related, etc. If you guys do have any account issues, any billing questions, or questions regarding that, you're better off just to email help@onxmaps.com. That way we'll be able to get to you more efficiently with those answers to those questions. So let's do a quick intro. Zach, you want to do a quick intro?
Yep. So Zach Sandow, been at onX for about 7 years. And, you know, I've grown up in Montana, so really elk hunting's been number one. Definitely love big game and upland and whitetail, but archery elk season, this is the greatest time of the year. We just need the weather the temps to go down a little bit. Early September can be a little tough, but the coming weeks are going to be awesome. This is what we look forward to. So as Dylan said, we're heading out this evening. I'm looking forward to it. That is my first trip of the year. So pretty exciting.
Yeah. And then Dylan Dowson here. And just like Zach, we've been here about the same time, about 7 years working for onX. And yeah, I'm excited for this weekend. I'm excited for the rest of the season. And yeah, we've waited all year. We've shot our bows all summer. We've prepped. We've been dreaming about it. And it's finally here. It's crazy. So hopefully we will cover some stuff today that you guys will learn from and will help to apply to your September or whenever you're able to get out next. Quick run through of what we're going to be covering. We'll keep this fairly high level and then get to a lot of your guys' questions toward the end. We're going to cover hunt app basics. And again, this is going to be archery elk hunting focused, but a lot of what we're going to cover is going to be able to apply to really anything. You know, whether it be rifle elk hunting, mule deer, whitetail, anything, you'll pick up a few things within the hunt app that you can use regardless. We're going to talk about a before the hunt checklist, just a few things that you guys should really consider doing and taking the time to complete before your hunt regarding the maps. And then we'll jump into question and answers after a really, really short demo. All right, so we're going to show you guys the map here. Again, if you're not familiar, what we're looking at here is the web map on the computer, but everything on the computer is also on your phone in the palm of your hand when you head out. Just for the ease of this, we're going to show it on the computer. And we're going to run through a couple quick things. We're going to talk about some of the layers that we like to use while archery elk hunting, and just kind of do a brief overview of the product just for anybody who's not super familiar with it. And then we'll jump into a bunch of questions after the fact. So kind of what we're looking here, obviously we have Idaho and Colorado layers turned on. Couple minor changes, but your map looks a little bit different, same as in the app on the phone. Now you're looking for this up here, the hunt map layers. So we have Colorado, Idaho turned on, Montana as well, but no layers turned on, etc. So we'll just go through a few of these layers and talk about, again, what we prefer to have on while we are archery elk hunting. Everybody uses the maps a little bit differently. So, you know, Zach might like some layers that I don't really care to have on while I'm elk hunting, and so on and so forth. But we'll kind of focus on Colorado since we have that loaded up already. Private parcels, obviously, that's a big one, especially if you're hunting a unit that has some private parcels and isn't focused on public lands there. So the more we zoom in here in Colorado, the more it'll populate those private parcels. And again, you know, this is probably pretty entry level, but if you ever don't want to see any of these layers, you can customize the map, just turn them on, turn them off, depending on what you want to see at any point in time. So I always have my private parcels on, especially if I'm hunting, these fringe areas where it's public lands, but you're on the border or potentially going to be close to private. Government lands, that's pretty self-explanatory. That's going to show your state lands, your BLM, your forest, etc., and kind of color scheme on that. So typically, blue is going to be your state, yellow is going to be your BLM, green is going to be your forest. If you're ever wondering what a particular piece of land is, all you have to do is click on it, and then more information will populate about wherever you select. So here I can see BLM, that is a 22.92 acre parcel, and then just a lot more information here that we'll dive into here in a little bit. But going back to the layers, I always have public lands on. The GMUs, so this is an important one for a lot of states. You want to make sure that you have the correct GMUs on. So if you go to details, here you can select between bighorn sheep, mountain goats, and then big game management units. In Montana, we have a lot more of these broken out. So we have, specific mountain lion units, black bear units, etc. So we get this question a lot. If you're ever looking for a different species, pronghorn units in the states that break those out separately, all you have to do again is go into the details under GMUs to select those different species. Possible access. Zach, you want to kind of dive into that one a little bit?
Yeah, so these would be our things, when it's state specific, and you definitely need to check with states, look at the regulations, but this is private land that is likely to open up different types of access. So warehouser and timberland and things like that. It's an awesome layer that is honestly an untapped source of access. A lot of folks don't know about it because it'll show up as private land. But once you turn that layer on, you can find some different areas and some cool access opportunities that may be looked past. And so that's very similar to like that walk-ins program. That's a state-specific private land open for public access, and there's different rules. So in Montana, there's different ways that you can access. Sometimes you have to sign in at a box. Sometimes you have to call in advance. But what's nice with that layer is when you turn it on, it's going to show which properties are in that program. Then you can tap on it like Dylan was showing you, and it'll actually give you the information that you need. And so these are two really key ways to find additional access that's outside of just hunting public land.
Yeah, definitely. And looking at the possible access, one other additional tip is click on the details if you're ever unsure what exactly that layer will tell you there, and we'll give you more information. So for this possible access, we have 89,000 acres of possible access in Colorado alone. So that just opens up a lot of opportunity. And then Zach also walked into the Colorado walk-in access here. Lots of really good opportunities there for additional hunting spots. So check those out. Land access, actually, so current conditions, we'll dive into those. Especially this time of year, I always have the active wildfire layer turned on. Let me find some here. I know right now we've been pretty fortunate all through summer in Montana, and then just as of a week or two ago, we have a lot of wildfires. So with this layer turned on, you will be able to see all of these little fire icons here are active wildfires. So the more you zoom in, the more it will populate. We'll see if we can find one here that has a border. So some of them are new enough that they don't necessarily have a perimeter established to them, but some do. And again, just as I showed you earlier, you can click on one of these and find out more information. Try and find one with a perimeter, but these ones might not if they're relatively new or small fires. But basically, once that fire is established enough, it will show you the perimeter of the fire. But if we click on this one here, so Dry Mesa, it was last updated September 8th. Approximate current acreage, 1. So 1 acre, that's a small fire. It's probably why we don't have a perimeter yet. And then you can find more information about it. You can go to the website to learn more, etc. So those are oftentimes updated more than once a day. So it's really good to know, okay, is there active wildfires in my area that I'm hunting? Do I need to move? Do I need to watch it and make sure I'm, A, safe, B, that unit's not going to be closed, etc. So I always have that one on, especially this time of year in September. Drought data, we've got air quality. We won't dive into a ton of these in great detail because we could spend the entire hour just talking about layers. Current conditions, that's when we're just at land and access. So I've always got the wilderness areas turned on. We'll see if we can find one here to show you what it looks like on the map. Here you go. So basically this area right in here, West Elk Wilderness, if I turn that off, you can see it removes it from the map. And especially like areas like Wyoming, for example, as a non-resident, I cannot hunt wilderness. So it's really good to know where those areas are, where that boundary is. And then also, just knowing that people won't be in there with ATVs and dirt bikes, etc. Slope angle. This is a relatively new feature for us. And so if we zoom in, you'll start to see a lot of different colors. So with the slope angle turned on, you'll notice in the upper right-hand corner here, 5 to 10 degree slope is going to be in that green. You're looking at like a 15 to 22 in the yellow, etc. So if you zoom in here, especially when you have topography turned on, you can see the head of this drainage here is really steep, and then that red reflects it. So that's going to be a really steep area. Really nice addition with the slope angle, especially if you're looking for those benches on maybe a steep ridge and so on and so forth. We'll go ahead and turn that off. See, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation layer. Zach, do you want to touch on that one real quick?
Yeah, so this is a cool program that, these are all the properties that RMEF opened up. And so they've worked with different state agencies, private donors, whatever. And so some of these will be habitat type projects, but a lot of these are actually access points. And so they've worked really hard to find different areas that will open up access to adjacent public lands. And so this is another opportunity that, a lot of times at the actual property, they will have a sign that says that this is an RMEF access site, and it'll have the rules and whatever it is, but there's a ton throughout the West. So if you turn this on, it's going to activate it throughout the entire West. These are also overlooked access and hunting opportunities that unless you have been to that location, you might not even know about it. So it's another layer like the walk-in programs and like possible access. So you definitely want to turn on because there's some cool hunting opportunities that'll get overlooked.
Yeah, and so again, click on it, tap on it on your phone. You'll see the project name, Southpaw here, who the managing partner is. In this case is Forest Service. Access permitted, yes. Hunting permitted, yes. So that's going to be some key areas that will open up some opportunities and help protect that access in those areas. And that's kind of what it looks like. You have the Elk Foundation logo and then the blue border. That covers it for the key ones for land and access that I like or that we like. Roads, trails, and recs. So you're going to want the trails on. If you go ahead and turn those on, you'll start to see the different trails in the area. I personally usually just leave the trail slope on as well. And again, the green is going to be a more mild temperament of the trail. Yellow is going to be a little steeper. Red's going to be kind of the steepest. And you can see that with the topography overlaid here. Green, you're kind of on the bottom, you're starting to climb up, but these topo lines are pretty spaced apart. And then, this portion of the trail that's red here is a little bit steeper. Those topo lines are closer together. So I usually leave that one turned on. I also leave on the trail mileage. That will show you the mileage in between the intersecting points. So for example, right here, it says 0.5. So between this point where it connects this trail and then this point where it intersects the trail again, that section of trail is half a mile essentially. So just a quick reference point, in between this section and this other intersection is 0.1 miles. So it just kind of helps you quickly be able to see like, okay, I'm looking at a 5-mile hike from the trailhead up into this area that I want to go, etc. Roadless area. I don't typically use this one while I'm hunting per se, but if I'm e-scouting, looking at new areas, I'll turn that on. What that's going to do is it's going to looks kind of a purplish color, whitish color. It's going to hotspot those areas that do not have roads or trails. So a lot of times that will coincide with, different, what's the word am I looking for? Just different areas of the units that just flat do not allow roads or trails or motorized vehicles, wilderness areas. So exactly, you zoom in here, you can see this is actually part of a wilderness area. If you zoom out, so the wider it is, this area in here is not going to have any roads or motorized activity in there. So again, I don't usually use that one while I'm hunting, but for e-scouting new areas, that can be helpful.
Real quick, it looks like we're having some issues with sharing the screen. Can everyone not see the screen, or is it just a couple of folks that are having problems? Go ahead and let us know in the comments.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of goods. Perfect. Yeah, we'll continue, and then we'll get to the Q&A section here in a bit where we won't have a shared screen, but it looks like a lot of you guys are seeing the screen, so that's good. Let's see, what else do we got?
For those that can't see it, maybe jump out and then jump back in and see if that connects better.
The last one we'll kind of touch on here is the motorized roads and trails. This one is pretty key to keep on at all times, in my opinion, so you can see what roads and trails are open, etc. So you'll see these purple lines here. If you click on one, you'll learn more information about it. So that this one is Porter Flat Road, 6.2 miles long. It is accessible by overland, high clearance, 4x4, side-by-sides, ATVs, and dirt bikes. It has the open dates and who it's managed by. So that's really helpful to know. Let me see if I can find one here. Let's see. Okay, so this one here that I just clicked on is motorized, open for ATV and dirt bike. So that's really good to know, because if I'm going to hike into this area to go set up a camp or something, it's good to know that that trail is accessible by dirt bike. So if I see somebody on a dirt bike, I know it's legal. I also might want to find an area that doesn't have a dirt bike trail going in if I don't have access to a dirt bike. I think that covers a lot of the layers. Again, we have a ton of, actually, we'll touch on this real quick. Zach, if you want to hit
Yep.
crops and tree cover.
Yeah, so this whole thing, really think about this as like food and bedding. And so obviously these are super important, whether you're hunting public or private. These are good ways for you to identify, even like we have right now, we have the crop and tree on it. So this is a good way for you to identify, for if you're looking for the trees, like, do I need to find specific trees that, they're bedding in or whatever it may be. The one that we really like is crop. So in Montana and just a lot of the West, a lot of these elk like to hang out on private down on, alfalfa hayfields, whatever, and then they'll move their way up into public. And so you're hunting those boundaries. And so it's really nice to be able to turn on this crop layer, identify where the good feed is. Then when you're going out, maybe you start scouting by actually looking in the private and figuring out where those animals are right at the, last light or in the morning, and then start to find where that transition that they're going to head up onto public. And you can start, formulating your plan for a hunt based on, we know where their food is. They're going to be where the cows are. The cows are going to go look for food. The bulls are going to follow. Then they're going to migrate up to cover. So having the crop to figure out the food, and then the trees to identify where the cover, you can figure out where you need to go for that intersection point. And so this is a big layer that we're using frequently, even if we're hunting public, just because it's good to know where the best feed is around that area.
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to find an area that has a little bit more diversity for crop. A lot of the crop in this area in this country is alfalfa, which is a really important one to key in on, especially as Zach was saying, for elk, deer, pronghorn, anything really. I mean, if you find a good alfalfa field next to some good bedding areas. If you glass that first thing in the morning or at last light, there's a really good chance you're going to find a lot of animals in there. So I'm trying to find an area, obviously not a ton of crops in Colorado, but here's another example. So here's a little bit different one, and you can either just kind of scroll over it. It'll say, hey, this darker one, a little bit of winter wheat in there, etc. One thing to note with this is it is last year's data. So it is 2022. We're looking at what was planted here in 2021. A lot of the times the farmers will have similar rotations. So you can start to key in on, okay, well, it was corn last year, it's soybeans this year, etc. A lot of times hay and alfalfa are going to kind of be intertwined. So what was alfalfa last year is many times going to be alfalfa or hay this year as well. Looks like there's a little bit of canola in there, alfalfa, etc. So, okay, if we get up into here, now we're starting to get into some corn, some dry beans, etc. So really helpful. You use that one, especially as you're scouting and in the field. And then really the last one here that I want to cover is historic wildfire. Obviously, that's really helpful to know for elk hunting in general, whether you're archery elk hunting or rifle hunting. And so with that layer on, you will see some fires populate. So this one was in 2018. And then if you zoom in, you will start to see the borders of that fire, to know, okay, if I'm hiking through here, this area up in here was not burned, etc. So if you want to hunt the fringes of the burn, you can see that exact border. And then again, just like anything, you click on that, you look at more information. That was 206,408 acres. And again that is the government lands for the wildfire, 3,000.
Looks like 36,000.
Yes. 36,381 acres, and was in September of 18. So then you can key in on, all right, this is an old fire. This is a relatively new fire. How do I want to approach this? Is this an area of interest, or am I going to stay out of this area, etc.?
Yeah. And one way to really target in on these is like looking at, and it depends. Like if you're looking at a burn from last year, if it's super hot, it's probably going to be charred. There may be some growth that comes up. Thing that's nice with fires is it burns all the cover off the ground, and then it lets those grasses grow up. So it's really good feed. The other thing it's beneficial for is typically it's a little more open, so you can glass in there. The one thing that's really nice though is targeting kind of that a year old to maybe 5 years old, depending on what country you're in. That will identify, like, yes, there's been some time for some good feed to grow up. And then finding a burn that is near some bedding area and finding those transition areas. These animals move out. The elk are going to be in there feeding, maybe in the mornings, evenings, and then looking for like a north slope that they're going to merge into some thicker cover where they're going to bed up. It's a really good spot to, for a starting point to identify where I want to start hunting. And so again, we're looking for food. We're looking for where the cows are going to go, and then the bulls will follow. Crops down in the private land or historic wildfires, looking at burns up on national forests, being able to identify the best places that they're going to feed, and then thinking about where are they going to go bed up midday.
Perfect. So we covered a lot of the layers. Let's dive into a little bit of your content management. If you're anything like us, I have, I think, 1,000+ waypoints, a ton of lines, trails, tracks, a lot of different content within the app, areas I've been, areas I want to go, etc. And we get a lot of questions on what's the best way to manage that content. So one of the ways that you can do it is while you are creating content or after the fact, you can go in and edit it. Say I want to mark this burn for whatever particular reason. If you take a little bit of extra time, instead of just dropping the initial red X waypoint on here, if you take just a little bit more time and customize that, you can add a name. So I could go in here and say possible elk hunt. And then you go to, we have some recently used icons, but if you click more, you have access to a whole slew of different icons here where you can customize what you're looking at, water source, wallow, point of interest, camp, etc., feeding area, anything like that. So if you can customize those for what you want to see. You can also change the colors of the waypoints. And this one here, you can utilize it a few different ways. Obviously, you can use like blue for water, wallow, etc. So you can quickly see that on the map. You can also go by species. So if I have all of my elk waypoints one color, all of my deer waypoints another, that really helps me differentiate if I have some overlapping areas. Maybe I want to only see my elk waypoints for this particular time of season, and I can remove all of the deer waypoints or just color coordinate them so I can see what I'm looking for. Another thing is by year. So if you are only an elk hunter, maybe after the season, you want to change all of your elk waypoints to a particular color. That way you can say, okay, blue is, the light blue color is 2021 season, and then next year have different ones to see kind of how that data corresponds with each other. You should add some notes to it, especially as you're out in the field. I can mark several different wallows, but if I don't add a note or add a photo to it, a year or two goes by and I'm wondering why I marked that particular one instead of the one up the drainage, etc. So add notes, add photos. You can, on your phone especially, just click that add, takes you right to your camera, take a photo, or you can pull one that you've already taken. Add those. That way when you save it, you're not just wondering next time you look at your map what you were thinking when you dropped that red X there. So that's one way. Zach, do you want to touch on folders?
Yep. And I think one other thing with waypoints is one thing that a lot of us do at the office is if we're scouting, we have a specific color that is like a point of interest that we've scouted, but we've never actually put boots on the ground. And that could be by species, could be by year, whatever. For me, I use yellow. Yellow is my point of interest. If I drop a waypoint there, it means I scouted it. It looks good. There's a burn there. I think there could be some feed. Then once I go in the field and validate, if it's good, then I'll change it to, for me, elk is brown. I'm going to switch it to that. I know it's a good spot, change the icon, add the notes, photos, whatever. And if it's a bad one, then I'll delete it. I'm going to remove that clutter from there. And so it just helps you doing that little bit, helps you stay organized so you don't have just a ton of red X's. The other thing you can do for organization is add it to a folder. So if we go here and click new folder, we'll call this, Colorado 2022 elk. Now I can add, and we can name this by unit, we can name this by hunt, whatever we want, but I can go in and add any type of content. So I can add my waypoints to it. I can add my tracks. I can add my areas and my lines. And this is nice because then what I can do is just go in and as soon as I'm going to that hunt, let's say maybe I even hunt deer in that same unit and I have a bunch of overlapping waypoints, I can just activate this Colorado elk folder and I have all the content I need and I can continue adding to it. And so it just keeps it organized. The other thing that's nice too is down the road, like if you're hunting with a buddy or whatever, you can then share that folder out with them and they'll get access to it. And so definitely doing a little bit up front just to make sure you stay organized really helps. You can always go back and change that. So if you're going to hunt this year in and year out, maybe you remove the year from it and it's just Colorado unit, whatever elk. And then you just keep organized with all your markups, all your years of information that you have can stay in that one folder.
Yeah, that's a relatively new feature and something that we're really excited about. So as you can see, it shows 21 waypoints here, 4 lines. This is a dummy account of mine, so all of my waypoints aren't on blast here. But I have several folders, whether it be, like Zach said, unit specific or maybe years, species. You can really break it up into a ton of different ways that'll benefit you personally. So those are some really key things for organizing your content, especially as you use the app more. You'll get more and more content every year, and it's easy to be a little overwhelmed and say, okay, I have 800 waypoints and I want to manage those, and you can actually do that now. So let's see. Next thing, what are some of your favorite GPS tools that you like using in the field?
Yeah. So for me, one thing that's really nice is obviously like all the phones have a GPS unit. So you can see the blue dot in there. But what's cool with that is it enables a lot of different things. So for one, tracks, like having tracks on to see what country you covered, or potentially like you hit an animal, you go drop a waypoint where last blood was, and then you can use the tracking function to actually do your breadcrumb kind of grid within that and see exactly what you covered. The other thing that a lot of people do is they just want to turn it on to see how much mileage they covered. And so it'll tell you during that track, you went X amount of miles going this average average speed. And what's nice is like, you know, you go in, you didn't follow a trail, you went off trail and you found a great game trail that you were going through. You could actually drop track on there, save it, add it to that folder and know, like, if I get stuck like down in the bottom or way up top off trail and it's dark, I then have that breadcrumb track to get me back out. And so using the tracking function is a big one. Being able just to get an idea of like what the easy places to traverse are, where the animals are likely traversing, and being able to get that on the map so you have that information the next time you go on.
Yeah, and honestly, tracking is underutilized. There's so many instances where I think it's important to track. Honestly, anymore, I'm tracking myself anytime I'm hiking in the field. Even if you don't realize it at the time, you may be going into an area for the first time. And if you have that tracker on and you need to come out in the dark, you can either A, follow that track if you knew it was a good route, or B, a lot of the times I will actually save tracks that I didn't like. So if I go into an area and it's really just not a good way to access an area, it might be super thick, it might be a little cliffy or whatever that looks like, I'll still save that track, but I will mark it a color that I know means, okay, I did this track and it was not optimal. So maybe going out or coming back the next day or something, I will try a different way. A lot of the times, you know, just finding a simple elk trail can make the difference between just a frustrating hike out in the dark and just like, you know, smooth sailing, hiking out. Life is good at that point. So I will track all the time. A lot of times delete those tracks, sometimes save them and say this was not a good track in, sometimes save them and say this was a very good way in, really efficient, quiet. That way, if I'm coming back out in the dark or if I'm coming in the next day or something, you can kind of just follow that track. Saves a lot of time, especially in the dark. Another one is Waypoint radius tool. This is a pretty new one, but something that we have found really, really useful here at the office. So a lot of different use cases for this, but I'm going to go ahead and drop a waypoint on a couple of different trailheads here and show you one, especially when scouting. So I'm going to just save that red X here. I'll drop another one. While I'm doing this, Zach, is there any in the field waypoint radius uses that you've liked?
Yeah. So like on this one right now, he's marking different access locations, right? And so what's nice is, you know, depending on the area, like there's people who hunt, they want to stay a couple miles away from the road or they want to go really deep. And so let's say you want to go really deep and you know, the further I get away from a road or access point, the less likely I'm going to see other hunters. And so what you can do is go in to these access points and drop the radius that you want. So let's say you believe that no one's going to, you know, you're going to cut down your hunters if you get outside 2 miles. Well, then what you can do is go set that radius on this access point and it'll actually build it out for you. And you know exactly like, here's how far I need to get outside that 2 mile radius where I believe there's going to be less hunters. So the deeper I get in, the more likely I have all the animals myself. One thing I would say, though, is there is such a push, especially on national forests, to go so deep. And everyone tries to get that 3 to 4 miles in. So I've actually talked to some folks who use the range radius to find these overlooked areas because a lot of people are just going to bust through that first 2 miles and not even really hunt it. And so they'll actually target those kind of overlooked areas. So that's one way you can use this radius tool. The other thing that's cool is like if you have an area similar to like we're looking now, you could put access points around that area, put the radius of 1 mile or 2 miles, and you'll start to see this overlap. And you'll be able to identify like, hey, this is the area that is 2 miles from any access point. And that's where I want to start my hunt. That's where I want to try to get away from folks. And so you can use this for a lot of different ways. The other one that was big is, let's say you shoot an animal and you find last blood, you drop a waypoint. You believe that he's going to cover X amount because this was a good shot. So he should be within, 3 to 300 yards, let's say. You can set that radius. And then, once you give him time, you can start there. So when you start gridding out, turn your track on, you first have a radius to say, here's where I'm going to cover first. And then once you get your blood additional blood, you can drop more waypoints, you can use your track, whatever, but you can start to actually grid this section out and see that you covered everything.
Yeah, a lot of different use cases. And to Zach's point there, so I just marked two trailheads essentially, and I threw 2 miles on. The nice thing too about the radius is it will give you whatever distance circumference that you put in, but it will also show you a half value. So this lighter inner circle is 1 mile. So you can see, okay, I'm halfway through, etc. So if in theory you want to go at least 2 miles from the trailhead before you set up camp, for example, you mark a couple trailheads. Well, now you're looking at areas up in here. The one thing to note, if you are doing that, it looks like there might be some access up here. So that's one thing to consider as well. Really look at all the access points, that we are not hiking, what you think is far into an area, only to find that you're close to an access point on the other side. So a lot of different use cases. One other one, might not be really applicable for elk, but for say spot and stalk, antelope or mule deer, I can drop a waypoint where I see an antelope, for example, bedded. And then if I'm archery spot and stalking, I can put a radius on that waypoint and say, okay, I want to be within 50 yards. Well, then I can see right on the map as I'm making that stalk, okay, I'm approaching, actually for this, I might put it at 100 yards, and then I know I'll have a 50-yard inner circle. So when I get to that 100-yard mark, I can see it on the map. All I have to do is pull out my phone real quick. I can tell I'm getting close about that 100-yard mark. Maybe that's where I want to take off my boots, drop my pack, really know, okay, the next 50, 60 yards I want to cover, I'm going to be close. I really have to start paying attention. And then once you get to that 50-yard bubble, especially if you can't see that buck while you're making the stalk, maybe he's up over a rise, hopefully, or something. Then okay, I'm within 50 yards, I'm within that comfortable distance to shoot, etc. And it really helps that way. So again, kind of a new feature there and one that's been really helpful. See what else we got. Couple things. We'll kind of blast through these next few things and get to some Q&A here soon, since we have a lot of really good questions. But a couple key things to remember on using the app during the hunt. I'll kind of share one first. I would say anytime that you, again, archery elk hunting specific here, anytime you get a bull to respond to you or bugle on his own, it is definitely worth taking the extra 45 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever it is, pulling out the app and looking and trying to figure out on the map where you think that bull bugled from. It's really easy to be caught up in the moment and grab your pack and your bow and just take off after it, only to say, you get halfway down there, it's like, shoot, was that bull here? Was he on the next ridge? Is there a bench that he could have been on? So really just take that extra, 20, 30, 40 seconds, whatever that is, pull up the map, look at topo, look at aerial, say, okay, I think that bull bugled here. Get a hunting buddy's opinion, and they might say, I think that bull bugled from here. Talk that out, drop a waypoint where you think he was, and it really helps as you stock in or help or continue calling that elk, just to know A, where that bull is bugling from, and then B, year after year, if you have those bugles marked, there's a lot of times those bulls will hang out on the same bench, in the same wallow, etc., and sound off from those locations. So it's really helpful. Just take a second, slow down, use the map before you take that next move would be one of mine.
Yeah, and another thing you can do with that is, like, if it's a little more open country, you may see the animal across, and so pulling out your rangefinder and ranging and getting the distance that it is, then using the line tool to actually more accurately pinpoint where that animal is. And so if you're able to see, maybe you can't see the animal, but you see the clump of trees he's in, whatever, you range it, get the yardage, it's 800 yards, whatever. Take the line tool from your location, mark that out, and then you can pinpoint using aerial imagery. I know he's right here in this group of trees, he's in this cut, whatever it may be. Then you can drop that waypoint because you now know the yardage, and then from there, you have a more accurate point when you're moving in on that animal.
Definitely. Okay, we'll move over to some pre-hunt checklist stuff. So one of the big ones, obviously, is save maps. We get the question all the time, we hear it at shows, we hear it in person, our customer service. Hey, like, I love your guys' maps. They are incredibly helpful, but where I hunt, I don't have cell service. That's probably one of the most the biggest misconception of the product is that it doesn't work, or it doesn't work fully functioning without cell service when it does. So all you have to do is save maps ahead of time. I would urge people, don't wait till the last minute. I saved maps probably a week ago for the hunt that we're about to do this evening. And Zach, do you want to walk them through a little bit on the different options for save maps?
So on web map right now, what you can do is you can say new offline map. Let's say we want to hunt this area with this burn, a little bit of public and private. We go new map. And so it'll let you choose. And so what this does is the different areas, if you're going 150, that's going to be a lower resolution, but a bigger area. 10 miles is going to be a medium resolution, and then 5. And what's nice is generally, if I'm covering a lot of country, I'm going to save that 150. You can save those very quickly. I can hit up the whole unit, that whole side of the state, whatever I want. And that will give me decent aerial imagery, but really focus on the boundaries, the GMUs, the public land. Within that, I can save a more detailed map if I want to be able to see those topo lines or aerial imagery within that 150. And so I'll start by taking 150, get the macro area I'm hunting. Then within that, start looking at these different micro areas, the fringes of that burn or whatever it may be, this bench, this ridge line, and save a 5 or 10. That way I can get that topography lines, that more detailed aerial imagery within that. And what's nice is when you do it on web, it's going to save that parameter, and then it's going to ping your phone to make sure it saves it. If you do it on your phone and you say, I want to save this area, it's just going to save it for you. I can name it, I can put the notes I want, and it'll live in there. And what's nice is like you could keep that year in, year out, and there'll be a little notification if something changes in there and there's been an update. All you have to do is tap on it and it's just going to update. Let's say maybe private parcels changed or something like that. It'll update those for you really quick, and then you're off and running. And once you get to the field, I've seen a lot of questions about battery life and stuff like that. Flipping online maps or offline maps is super important. One, it saves your battery. Most importantly, it lets you use it without service. But also there's times where you're on this fringe of service. And so, all smartphones take a while to load anything when you're on the fringe. So sometimes if you have the map saved, it's just better just to flip it. You can either hit offline mode, or you can just flip your phone on airplane mode. It's going to save your battery and use that GPS in your phone, and it'll work much quicker. So definitely make sure you have those maps saved. Once you get to the field, if the service isn't great and you don't need service for any reason, flip your phone on airplane mode. It's going to make it last much longer, and you'll be able to see everything you're doing. You can still mark waypoints. You can still see your location on there, use tracks, everything.
Yeah. So again, make sure you're saving those maps and save more than what you think. Unforeseen circumstances, you get to a trailhead, there's more people there than what you thought. Have backup areas, save those backup areas, and so on and so forth. Another one too is before I'm going out, say if I'm hunting up in this area, I'm going to just mark the map up with where I think camp might be, maybe a couple different options for where I'm going to camp, maybe just a generalized hunt plan as far as, okay, the first day I kind of want to hit this glassing point, I'm going to mark that. You don't have to get crazy with it, but just some starting points. That way, when you get out there, you have a plan ahead of time. And then it really kind of the final piece to that is sharing some of that. So whether I'm meeting up with Zach or a hunting buddy at a trailhead in the morning and he's never been there, if I mark that camp location, just share that with him. That will ping his phone, open right up in the Hunt app, and then they'll be able to navigate right to that location. So that's really helpful for that. Obviously, if you're successful and you get an elk down and have service and you can send that message out, we've used it for that in the past as well. For, hey, was successful. I'd love a couple extra strong backs and on trying to get this bull out of here. Here's my location. Send that waypoint. Now, you don't have to do drive up the road about 4.5 miles and there's a down tree on the right, and then you're going to take a left, and then there's a sign and all that stuff. So you just share those waypoints. And then also, especially if you're hunting solo, but it is beneficial even when you're hunting with a hunting buddy or a party, to at least let somebody know where you're going to be. So I will mark a couple waypoints for generally where I'm going to be hunting. And then I'll share those with my wife or my uncle or, a hunting buddy, somebody that if they don't hear back from you, they at least say, hey, here's where, he said he was going to roughly be. A really good starting point and is worth that extra step just for an additional safety feature there.
Yep. And one question I see coming up quite a bit, everything you do that you mark on a computer, your phone, someone else's phone, that is attached to your account and it'll sync between them. So whatever device you log in on, it will pull those waypoints that you marked on other devices. So it'll always sync your content, your save maps, everything will sync between your devices.
Yep. So that kind of covers it for the mapping portion here. We'll speed through these next couple and get to some questions. More ways to learn. So our website is probably the best one-stop shop resource, but there's a lot of different places out there. So onxmaps.com, we have a lot of tutorials there that walk you through a little more in depth of what we just covered. Our YouTube demos, we do a lot of short YouTube videos for, hey, here's how to use the Hunt app as a range finder. Here's how to use the Hunt app for spot and stock hunting, etc. So check those out on YouTube. Our customer support center, our customer support team is awesome. They are out there using the product. They'll answer your calls, answer your emails, and take care of you there. And then also these master classes that we're doing, currently, all the previous ones we've done are now on YouTube. So we have, we've done some elk specific ones with Dan Staten of Elk Shape. We've done some spot and stock ones with Eastman's. We've done some app, 101s, just like elementary, here's how to use the product type stuff. So go to our YouTube, onX Hunt, check all of those out as well. And then again, this one will actually be on YouTube probably tomorrow, but shortly as well, if you want to reference or send it to a buddy who couldn't make it or something. We do have a lot more master classes coming up. Our customers, you guys are liking them, so we're going to keep doing them. Please let us know, actually, after this one, you'll get a survey. Let us know what you liked, what you didn't, how we can improve it moving forward. But for signing up for future master classes, we'll actually throw the link to that in the chat right now. So you can click that, you can sign up. It's no obligation if you can't make it, at least get signed up. That way we can notify you, hey, it's a week out, hey, it's a day out, here's the link, and so on and so forth. So we have everything from, more elk ones to upland hunting to whitetail focus ones to you name it. So keep an eye on that page as well. And then we'll dive into, I'm going to stop sharing here and we'll dive into some questions. Looks like we have at least 15 minutes or so. So let's see if I can find my questions here. I need the help.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, I'll find a question while we're going. So a couple of things, sharing waypoints. Waypoint radius. So is waypoint radius an elite function? That will be in all of our waypoints. You can use that on premium or elite. Really, any of these features we've talked about will be within your premium or elite membership. So you'll be able to access it no matter which membership level you have. Another question that was coming in is sharing waypoint, sharing content. So if you go in on your phone and tap on it, it's going to give you a list of a bunch of different things. You can edit it, whatever. If you tap share, you can then just click it. It's going to pull up a link. You can choose how you want to do it, email it, text it, whatever, and you can send that out. That's the same thing with folders as well. So if you have a folder, you can add that content to it, and then you can share that folder to whoever you want.
All right. So again, we have a ton of really good questions. We'll do our best to get to as many as possible here. First one, can I determine the wind direction with the onX app?
Yep. So there's a couple different ways you can do this. If you go on web map or if you're on your phone, so we'll talk about it on the phone here. If you tap on, any location, you'll see up in the top right corner, there's going to be a little green thing there. And once you tap on that, it's going to give the weather for the area you're looking at. And when you tap on it, it'll tell you what the temperature is, what the predominant wind is, everything as far as like sunrise, sunset. The other way you can do it is if you tap on a waypoint. So let's say you mark a waypoint on there, and you know, where there was the radius tool where you're showing that right above, it says wind direction. And if I tap on that, I can say, show me the current wind direction, or if I want to set the optimal wind direction. So like, let's say we know it's a wallow, bedding areas on the north side. I need the wind coming from the north if I'm going to approach. So I can set whatever the optimal wind of where I want to approach. And then that way I can look from a macro level. I can just see on that waypoint, it's going to tell me, yes, the wind is optimal. This is a good time to move in. Or it may say, no, it's actually coming from the south. Elk are bedding on the north. It's going to be pushing your wind directly to them. So you don't want to go. So if you tap on a waypoint, you can add the current wind, or you can set the optimal wind. Or if you just want to see the weather, tap on that little green circle in the top right corner, and it will have different things you can flip through between temp, wind, whatever. And it'll give you the weather for that area you're looking at.
Perfect. So next question, I'm going to actually share again and go back into the map for just a second if we can do that. Question is, how can you locate benches using the app? And I'm having some technical difficulty sharing, so actually I'm just going to stop and we'll answer it that way. So basically, when you're looking at topography, you know, again, this is kind of really going back to the basics with topography, but the closer the lines are together, the steeper it is. So if you're looking at, say, a north-facing slope, you know, orient the map with the north up, you'll see usually a lot more vegetation timber on those north-facing slopes because they're getting less direct sunlight. Oftentimes, elk will like to bed on north slopes. I know that was another question we got. Might as well address that, you know, kind of in the same answer here. So the question for that one was, do elk always bed on north-facing slopes? I would say as a good rule of thumb, they typically do, but they're looking to bed anywhere that the sun is not going to be beating down on them all day long. And typically north-facing slopes are that area, thicker cover, usually some steep terrain. And then if you can find those benches on north-facing slopes, a lot of the times, especially if water is nearby, you're going to find a lot of elk sign or elk in those locations. So again, the closer the topography lines are together, the steeper it is. And then when you see those topography lines kind of knife out and start to get farther and farther from each other within kind of a steep area, that's what you're looking for benches. And really, it doesn't take a big bench area to attract elk. I mean, we found elk on just, you know, small benches. It's really steep, it's really thick, and then there might be a 20 or 30 yard part where the mountain kind of benches out a little bit right there, and it kind of acts as a magnet, if you will, for bedding elk, for elk looking for bedding locations. So next one's here. Offline maps, best settings. So how to use offline maps. We covered that one here just a little bit ago. Again, save multiple maps, save the 150s to make sure you're set no matter what. Within that, save multiple 10s, 5s, etc. Pretty much I am using 10-mile maps and 150s. If I know exactly where I'm going to be hunting and you know, I really need a lot of detail, I need the finest imagery I can get, then I'll go ahead and save a 5. But for the most part, you can get away with those 10-mile maps and then 150s. And I have probably, you know, 40, 50 maps across Montana saved. So don't be afraid to, again, save more area than what you think that you might need. What are some considerations I should take while archery elk hunting in plains compared to mountains? So I know Zach and I both have some experience with both. Is there anything that you approach differently if you're hunting more plains or breaky type country?
Yeah, so Dylan and I actually both have permits that are more in the breaks and open country. And so, you know, when I'm in the thick timber and I'm up high, like it's a little tougher to see. The game there is trying to locate elk. So lots of locate bugling, whether it's at night, driving roads, or during the mornings, just covering country and trying to find them. Typically trying to call, get in that bubble and try to call them in. When I'm out in the plains and I'm in the breaks and open country, a lot of it's spot and stock. You know, the thing with elk is like, if you try to call too much, there's not as much cover. And if they pinpoint where that sound is coming from and don't see something, typically they're going to get hung up. And so a lot of what I've been doing and where I've seen success in the past is utilizing, like, especially in the breaks or anything open country, there's going to be some private land. So I try to find where the feed is, and I try to find the adjacent public that I can get onto it and where they're covering. The other thing is I'm just looking for the elk, identifying where they're at, and then I'm using the topography lines to find drainages or little ridges or whatever that I can figure out where they're going to move and I can intersect them, or how I can plan my stock to get in there. And so with a lot of open country, I am really covering country, looking for them, whether it's on private, whether it's crop or whatever, or in, hay fields, whatever it may be, or I'm just getting up first thing in the morning and I'm letting my glass do the walking for me, figure out where they're at, and then figure out where they're going to go bed and start planning my stock from there to move in close. And once I get in close, I've had success cow calling in and stuff like that. But as far as like super open country, trying to challenge them, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's much more difficult because you don't have that cover and they can see through there. And typically they're going to be a little reserved and not want to push in quite as far. And so generally I'm trying to stay very quiet, not let them know I'm there, and move to where they're going to be and intersect them. Or if they bed up, I'm going to plan a stock out and try to get in on them.
Yeah, definitely. I would echo everything that Zach just said, and it's just different tactics. I enjoy both, a lot. What we're doing this weekend will probably be a lot more of moving, trying to locate elk, trying to get a bugle response, some more timber where you're not really using the optics a whole lot. And yeah, I enjoy both. I've found, we've both found some success in both, and just different ways of doing it there. Next one. So how can I drop a pin when I'm out of cell range? So again, misconception, you have full GPS functionality, whether you have cell service or not. So that actually does not matter. You can drop a pin just the same out of cell service as you do if you were sitting in the comforts of your home with Wi-Fi. So you can drop a pin, you can, change the name, you can add notes like we showed and talked about, so on and so forth. How can I move a saved map or a saved point on my map when it's a little off location? So you can tap on a waypoint or a track or a, line, anything like that. And what you're going to see is an option to edit. If you edit it, then you can move that point around to different locations. That's also where, again, you can change the color, you can change the icon type, etc. Next one here. So if you set up on a wallow or water source, can you sit it out all day or do you move according to the thermals wind? That's kind of a tough question. I mean, I know last year, for example, I have a story where I chose to move. I was actually sitting on some water. It was a really hot day and couldn't get much action, couldn't find many elk, but I knew some elk were frequenting this water. So I was sitting on the water and the wind wasn't just perfect. And so I was actually picked up my stuff and I was going to move a little bit. And in doing so, I busted a really nice bull that was walking right into water there. So that's a tough one. I mean, obviously, if your wind is blowing in the direction that you think those elk are coming from, you're better off moving, because if they're going to smell you before they see you. But also, if it's prime time and the wind isn't just perfect, I would probably stick tight, especially after my experience last year watching a really nice 6-point run away from me at 30 yards since I decided to stand up at that moment.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple things to consider too. So if you're sitting on a wallow and let's say it's a little bit thicker cover around, you can use things to try to identify where the animals are. If you haven't seen where they're coming, you can look for where the game trails are, which one's more used. You can also look at the map, identify the good bedding cover that you believe they're going to be coming over to actually transition into that wallow. The other thing too to consider is time of day. So you may have, a predominant wind that's pushing one direction. You definitely want to take that into account. But then the other thing is with the thermals, as that temperature starts cooling, let's say it's the morning or whatever, it's going to start pulling down. And so that will help if you know that they're up above you coming down. Those thermals are going to go, but you need to keep that predominant wind in account, because if like you see the game trails are coming from this direction, it is like beaten down because there's so many elk moving, there's good bedding cover up there. I would try to get yourself in a position that wind is not pushing there. But sometimes it's just, elk will do elk things and they'll come from different locations. So I would say the best thing you can do is try to figure out which way the predominant wind is, get that in your favor based on where it appears the animals are actually accessing that wallow, and then consider time of day and think about what those thermals are going to be doing.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good transition into this next question. How to approach elk in the morning. So basically this person is saying the thermals are in the elk's favor, and then accessing from the opposite side is non-existent. So basically, how do you approach a herd of elk when the thermals are in their favor? And one thing I would say is pull out the app, turn on the topo layer. Again, mark where you think those elk are located, whether they're bugling, whether you saw them there, whatever that looks like. Mark their location. And then what I've found success in is getting on the same level as them. So, if the thermals are going up and you're above the elk, obviously, or if the thermals are going down and you're above the elk, obviously you can't approach, from top down. But if you go over half a mile, quarter mile into another drainage where, your scent isn't going to get ran straight to that herd of elk, get on the same level, look at the topography lines, figure out where they are, get on that same elevation band, and then work in on the side as much as possible, and just stay, close for as long as possible. And hopefully something good happens there. But I think using the app in the field while hunting is underutilized for those type of things. Mark where they are, look at that topo, figure out ways that you can access them better using the app. Maybe you're thinking about going down this ridge line, but if you look at the app, if you just go another 400 or 500 yards, there's a perfect spot where you can go down and intercept them that way or something. So pull out the app, use it in the field, and take the extra minute to make sure you're doing that correctly. Way to organize waypoints. We covered that quite a bit. Let's see. Any tips on how to track a wounded animal using the app? If you want to.
Yeah. So, I would say the biggest thing is obviously you make the shot. Great. Give it a little bit of time. It's really hard, but be patient. Identify, especially if you have someone with you, chat with them, make sure, try to talk about where you hit that animal. Then once you give them a little time, maybe you move up a little bit, try to find first blood, find the arrow, and try to get more information. So if you find that arrow and, it's light blood, there's some bubbles, whatever, it's a lung shot, great. Then you can still, you get more data and you start to figure out your plan. So it's a good shot. I'm going to give him half hour to an hour and a half, whatever it may be. Sit in that location, mark a waypoint where that first blood is and where the arrow, so where they hit. I would always drop a waypoint at that location of where they were. From there, based on what you're seeing from the arrow or what on the shot, you can build that radius. And so if it's a long shot, it's like, hey, I'm going to look a couple 100 yards around. After I wait, I'm going to mark that radius, turn on my tracker. And as I start finding blood, whether you're marking it with little ribbons or you're dropping waypoints, you'll still have a track to see what you covered. If you have hunting buddies, they're doing the same exact thing. And then what's nice is after you guys do that track, Dylan and I have done this before. We had 3 or 4 guys looking for an animal that we couldn't find for a little bit. We each had different tracks, and we actually ended up backing out. And what was nice is we changed the color of each one of our tracks so we could see who covered what. And we then had this perfect grid of okay, here's the areas we haven't covered, all 4 of us, because we could see it within our tracks. So once you mark that radius, you have that first area you're looking, then using things like waypoints for blood or the tracker function to see what you covered, then you can get a better idea of where you're missing.
Yeah, definitely. And another one to add on to that is, I know I said multiple times, take the extra second and, name the waypoints and choose colors and types and so on and so forth. But we do also have a feature that's called Mark My Location. And so that's just a really quick drop a waypoint where my GPS location is. And that one has come handy for blood trailing. I'll just kind of keep my phone open and have that readily available. Every time I find blood, I'll just tap that Mark My Location. That way, you're going to end up with a lot of waypoints, but at least that way, if I can't find the next spot, I can say, okay, well, here's a waypoint for the last known location. And I can go back to it and start over from there. So yeah, definitely utilize that tracking feature first and foremost. And as Zach said, mark where you shot from. Again, it's easy to get excited, get wrapped up, and just start trying to find that blood and trying to find that elk at the end of it. But use the app; it will help you. How to identify different types of trees. So I know we briefly we mentioned trees, we showed a little bit of it, but if you go into the detailed section, so if you're looking at that layer, click details within there. We have it broken out: acorn tree, red fern, just all sorts of different trees there. And you can actually turn those on and off depending on what you want to see. So if you're only looking for, one specific type of tree, you can shut all the other ones off to highlight that on the map. Similar to what we had shown with the game management units changing for the species, you can do the exact same thing for the trees there. All right, we are a few minutes over. We will take one more question, then kind of wrap it up. And again, if anybody has any questions regarding their app or their account billing, anything like that, help@onyxmaps.com is definitely the best, and we'll make sure to get your questions answered there. Let's see, one more. Is it better for new elk hunters to hunt one area and get familiar with it rather than change areas frequently? This one's going to be probably depending on quite a few different things here. I'll take a stab at it and then let Zach, but I definitely kind of lean toward knowing an area better. The areas that I frequent year to year, it seems like every year that I go there, I understand it better. If I see elk in a particular area, there's chances that I've either stalked them in that area or called to them in that area before in the previous seasons. And so it really just helps me be comfortable and say, okay, well, I know that there's a herd of elk that usually hangs in these pockets. And if they transition out of this country into the next drainage, they typically use one of these two saddles. And you can start to paint a picture, especially as you mark those waypoints and those tracks and everything. And for me, it's a confidence thing. I can go in there and have a much better understanding of how I can be successful. Probably because I, made some mistakes in previous years in that same country. So for me, I prefer that, but also, obviously you have to be where elk are to be successful. So if you're hunting areas that, you can't find elk in a few days, I'd say pull the plug and go try somewhere else, try some new areas, use the app, to find new locations and go check them out.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a lot of preference. If you're finding elk or elk sign in that area, getting a better understanding of it will help you be more successful. However, if you're not and it's slow, the thing that's nice during Archery Elk is obviously they're giving up their location. You can hear bugles, you can strike a bugle. And so I think always, like when you're planning and we, like a pre-hunt checklist, part of that should also be like, here's my core area. Maybe I have hunted it or not, having everything scouted from there, but then having like a B and C plan. And if you're not seeing something, pull the plug, go identify some good bedding, go identify good food, and start moving country and just bugling and trying to strike a bull up. And a lot of times, like if you're in a country that you can see or hear the animals and you are, a lot of people, and again, this is a preference thing, but there's, folks say don't leave elk to go find elk. If you're on them and you know that area, you probably have a pretty good chance. You just need a little bit of time and luck. But if you're not hearing them, go find some different country, find a burn, find a good crop, private, whatever, and start moving and trying to figure out where they're going to be. For me, like if I'm in a brand new area, I will spend a lot of time just covering country, whether it's in the pickup or, at night trying to road bugle and get bulls to answer, or if I'm just hiking through trying to locate, or even another one is just driving in the evenings and mornings and looking at private and trying to figure out where those animals are and then figure out the public. So I lean a little more towards if I'm not seeing elk, cover country and try to find them because they are talking right now and they will give their location up. But if you know it, then I would say get as much information and as much knowledge about that area will make you more successful.
Definitely. Well, awesome. Thank you guys again for taking an hour in the middle of the day here and joining us. We appreciate it. Let us know. Like I said, we'll send you out an email with a link to the recording actually. So, if you had to miss part of it, or if you want to send it to a hunting buddy, etc., you'll be getting that. And then you'll also get a survey. So again, let us know what do you like with these? What do you not like? What do you want us to cover on upcoming ones? Etc. So again, appreciate it. Good luck in the elk woods. Zach and I are a couple hours out from hitting the road and going to try and find some elk ourselves. So good luck. Let us know if you have any questions, and thank you guys.
Thanks, everyone.